In the name of
We are
Allah.
right now live.
Yeah, please,
Over to you, sir.
please cap your mics first. In the name of Allah, most gracious and most merciful. And Martin Luther King rightly said, if you have not supported the oppressor, then you have supported the aggressor. So our today debate is changing political dynamics of the South Asia and our role. And first of all, I will request humbly to Suraya Buhit, who is our guest of this webinar from United Kingdom, London. She is a French lady and she has spent her all life in human rights as a human rights activist. Suraya Buhit, mic is yours, madam.
Well, so it is, first of all, greetings, salam alaikum, and good afternoon from me, from London. I'm delighted to take part in this very timely conference. I'm particularly delighted to have made so many more brothers. I think I am really gathering now a very large family of very committed, brilliant thinkers, and indeed all-round good human beings. So it's a tremendous privilege to share this platform with all of you. Obviously, it would take too long to recap everything. I just want to review the last year, particularly in relation to the unconstitutional, undemocratic, and of course illegal revocation of Article 370 and 35A. That was a very unilateral course of action that was taken by Mr. Modi and his BJP RSS Hindutva regime. I also want to stress the fact that India, under Mr. Modi's rule, has moved away from the ideals that it once espoused in terms of being a democratic, secular, constitutional, egalitarian, and pluralistic land. We must not forget that India is made up out of all of the diversity of its individual constitutive parts. So without that diversity, there would be no India. And prior to the emergence of the modern concept of the nation state, there was no India. It was just merely another little kingdom or many different kingdoms ruled by different kings. So the fact that Mr. Modi has decided to give himself the right to go and commit acts that have transgressed all universal.
कैसर हम आपका सुन रहे हैं, कैसर हम आपका सुन रहे हैं.
May I continue?
Yeah, madam, you continue, please.
Thank you. The fact that Mr. Modi gave himself the right to go and commit on a daily basis acts of transgression of such a magnitude is indeed again telling about the mindset of Mr. Modi and his BJP RSS Hindutva regime. Mr. Modi espouses the same mindset as his fellow counterparts in occupied Palestine. And that mindset is very much to do with settler colonialism. It has nothing to do with development. It has nothing to do with the pretexted premise of going forward with investing or getting investments with a view to develop Kashmir. That's the last thing that they want to achieve. The first thing that they are seeking to achieve is to very much rule over the geography. Similarly to their Zionist counterpart, Mr. Modi and his BJP counterparts our or colleagues rather, allies, are only intending to do one thing, and that is that they want to appropriate the geography and rid themselves of the demography. Obviously, the demography is inconvenient. The speed with which Mr. Modi acted since the revocation of Article 370 and 35A is indeed mind-boggling. It is as though, in a frenzied haste, they are trying to bring as many changes on the ground, create as many facts on the ground as they can. Of course, that doesn't give any kind of legitimacy to whatever they have done, because all of their actions are not only contrary to sense and dignity, to the universal human values and the legal principles that we all uphold. It is an ongoing, blatant disregard to every convention and every legal norms that Mr. Modi claims to uphold. And clearly the international community can see it on a daily basis, that Mr. Modi does one thing and one thing well, and that is it violates every possible legal international norms. Now, when somebody ratifies and signs a treaty, a convention, it means that they are legally bound. It means that they cannot derogate, which means that the international community is in a position to do many things. One of them would be to enforce sanctions. The other one is obviously to make sure that Mr. Modi complies with international law and with human rights, humanitarian law. The problem that arises is that the international community, which formulated all of those legal norms, is itself not very keen, as has been shown, to make any statements, any definite statements of which would then clearly say that they are committed to being honest partners in the process of resolving the Kashmir problem. Obviously, the international community hasn't done that in terms of Palestine, occupied Palestine, and they are not doing that either in terms of occupied Kashmir. Briefly, the UN issued two very robust reports in 2018, 2019, and there are more than enough recommendations. One of the first recommendation is to allow full and unimpeded access to UN observers so that they can indeed be there on the ground and meet with people and start to engage and monitor and record and report everything. Now, very special rapporteurs have also made recently some very unambiguous, issued some unambiguous reports and made some statements. And what is now required is for the international community to get its act together and start doing what it is legally bound by in terms of all of the international legal norms. So, in view of the fact that we have a geopolitical prism through which to look at everything in relation to Kashmir, is indeed something that we must always bear in mind, because the geopolitical economic games that are taking place in the region are obviously overshadowing the issue of Kashmir. We all know that the Iranian ambassador in Islamabad spoke about a golden ring, in other words, a golden age. And he was referring in particular referring to China, Iran, Russia, and Pakistan and Turkey. So India is not factored in, nor is America. With a view to linking Godwar as well as Chabahar, is that how you pronounce it, to China through very complex infrastructure, railway infrastructure that would be going through Pakistan. So that obviously implies a very wide-ranging strategy, and that strategy involves the two main stakeholders, China and Iran. We may also recall that President Xi Jinping did visit Iran. I think it was in 2016. So the scope of this alliance is indeed more than significant, because it involves many different industries and sectors and infrastructures, from transportation, so railways, which I have mentioned, ports, airports, of course, banking, because of all the investments that will be injected in this project. It involves telecommunication. It involves also free trade areas or zones. So we must also be very cautious and remind ourselves that, of course, the US is not going to stand by. The US is going to do what it does best, and that is to be obstructive and intransigent, because it obviously wants to protect its interests in the region, and it will do anything to support India in order to create some form of a stalling mechanism through which it can impede progress. And I'm, of course, referring to CPEC. So by impeding China, it will also intend to have an impact on Pakistan, which might be emerging as a regional viable power. And America wouldn't want that to be a reality, to become a reality, because then this will buffer any aspirations supported by the US, backed by the US, that India may want to partake in or display. So it will more or less create a level playing field. So this is a strategic development, which has, of course, also great military, apart from the economic importance. Because of the geography, it has great military import. Now, let us return back to the daily human rights violations in regard to all of the many forms of lockdowns that our brothers and sisters in the valleys have been affected by and afflicted by. I tend to remind my fellow British counterparts about the fact that you are at least under a good 10 forms of lockdowns. Of course, the abrogation of 370 and 35A, the ongoing restriction of movements, the prevention of pursuing education, or even seeking medical treatment, or even allowing medical practitioners or mental health practitioners to engage with their counterparts, either within the context of Indian occupied Kashmir or by way of online webinars, with a view to exchange professional support. And the fact that the internet has been downgraded from 4 to 2G makes everything even more complicated. The fact that it takes longer than 10 minutes to download a latest medical guideline in regard to COVID, which is, again, another way of keeping people under siege. The fact that elected political figures have been unlawfully detained, journalists, human rights defenders, civilians. The fact that all of those people do not have access to due process. The fact that they are being detained in overcrowded prisons, and the fact that by virtue of the fact that they are detained in overcrowded prison cells, that they are put at risk, which is, in my view, a conscious intent to maximize exposure to COVID, so they may contract COVID and therefore, possibly that might possibly cost them their lives. The fact that children are being routinely harassed, threatened, the fact that rape is being used as a weapon of war, which was clearly declared to be a war crime. So there are many multiple forms of lockdowns. Now, here in London, we are merely suffering a very soft form of confinement. There is no military, no paramilitary, no other form of military personnel on our streets. Our police is still very much civilian, and so therefore accountable. We can go out, we can do, whatever we want. So using the very term lockdown has, in my view, whether it was conscious or not, created a false equivalency between the sort of lockdown that people in the valley experience and the sort of lockdown that people in Palestine, occupied Palestine, experience. So basically, lockdown, another term for it is siege. So we are not under any kind of we are not under a state of siege. So the first time people here in the UK heard the term lockdown was precisely when Modi revoked Article 370. And because of COVID pandemic outbreak, that term was used by our elected official, our prime minister. And I think it was really misguided. And I think it was not particularly wise of him to use the term lockdown, because it made everybody think, everybody here in the UK think, oh yeah, we're in a lockdown, so are people in Kashmir. It's completely not the case. So we need to rectify that. So there is a tremendous role for civil society, obviously, to play. I know that I do that myself in my capacity as a private citizen. I know that I lobby my official. I know that I use my democratic right to hold my officials, the government, to account. I know that they demand transparency and accountability. But if I were in the valley and I tried to do that, I'd probably be disappeared, like many people have. And there are over, I can't remember the current figures, but let me just say that there must be at least up until today, over 10,000 people who have been disappeared. So if that is not in itself criminally, a criminal act, I don't know what is, particularly from a government who claims to be democratic. I think that there is, from a point of view of Modi's governance, his regime is more akin to that of Franco's Spain, Mussolini's Italy, and even the Nazis. I personally know that in my region, which is northeastern France, which has a border with Germany, we were invaded first by Bismarck and then by Adolf Hitler. I have very vivid recollections as a child of the elders in the village sitting us down in the village square and recounting to us what they did to resist the belligerent occupier, the Nazis. And they've all said, all of the men and women who fought together side by side, they've all shared the same thing. And they said that they found anything they could, a stone, a rock, a piece of wood, a discarded weapon, and they fought and resisted as best as they could, first of all, to protect their lives, but also to protect their homeland. Now, that was way before the right to resist the military occupier was enshrined after the Second World War and protected, which gave people an option to resist peacefully or to resist through armed resistance. Now, all of the French people who were involved in the liberation of my country, of course, I wasn't born there, but I certainly know where I would have been had I been born, are always referred to as members of the French resistance. They are celebrated as freedom fighters. They are remembered as valiant militants. So if they are always described in such terms, my view is that using the principle of linguistic interchangeability, if I were to take away French freedom fighter, and if I were to put in Algerian freedom fighter, South African freedom fighter, Palestinian freedom fighter, and of course, Kashmiri freedom fighters, everybody should understand that when the political space for negotiating, for talking, for coming round to the table to discuss whatever needs to be discussed in order to pave a way forward, when people who have given up the arms struggle have been invited to the negotiating table, many have been duped. They are invited, but they are very often lured into believing that the negotiating space is an honorable space, which will lead to an honorable resolution, in which all stakeholders have an integral part. So we have seen that, for example, in the case of Yassin Malik, who used to be an armed, who chose the way of arms in terms of the way in which he resisted the military occupier. And then having given up the arms struggle, having been persuaded to give up that, and having been told, come round, we're going to sit together, we're going to thrash out, formulate a way forward. Well, now, unfortunately, Mr. Malik is held in probably very insalubrious condition. His health is probably failing him as we speak by the day. And of course, there's no due process, no international community heads of states have actually condemned any of that stuff, or even obliged Modi to release all political prisoners. Because, for example, in England, in America, in any Western democratic state, people who hold a different point of view are not incarcerated. People are at freedom, are free to criticize anyone. God knows I criticize Boris Johnson. I'm not incarcerated for telling him that I think that he's incompetent and very good at dithering, very good at not committing. I'm still able to walk around freely. He may not like to hear that next time, but you know, I'm just simply saying that that alone should command the attention of world leaders. That alone should make Mr. Modi come into a position where he then begins to accept the fact that he has transgressed everything, and that he needs to abide by international law. He's already violated the Indian constitution. That has been butchered ever since the advent of Mr. Modi. And he's also in complete, is contravening every other legal norm. So, you know, those two factors alone should be sufficient to ensure that world leaders step in. But of course, when you have the greatest transgressor, such as America, which is currently threatening the International Court, Criminal Court, because a war crime investigation process has begun, and the prosecutor is investigating American war crimes. Of course, Mr. Trump and his administration are not particularly delighted, and they do what they normally do, and that is to threaten to withhold funding. The same thing as Mr. Trump did to the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, the only agency set up to provide in order to meet the needs of Palestinian refugees. So, of course, after that, we had the deal of the century, or what I refer to as the poison chalice of the century. Again, no legitimacy whatsoever. And of course, we had the moving of the American embassy to Jerusalem, which is legally a corpus separatum, which means that even moving the American embassy to Jerusalem does not afford it any legitimacy. So what I tend to do is I tend to always draw the parallels between Palestine and Kashmir. because I think that both of those struggles are absolutely inseparable. My view is, until both are liberated, no one is free. Your Black Day was the 27th of October 47, and the Palestinians' Nakba was just a few months later in May 48. So obviously, both of these military occupations are the product of a settler colonial expansionist enterprise mindset. You are probably fortunate in Kashmir, where the military occupation is not quite as entrenched as it is in occupied Palestine, because the peace process in relation to the emergence and creation of an independent, viable, thriving Palestinian state has been held to ransom through the length of the protracted peace process, which resulted in Palestinians yielding a huge amount, making huge concessions, which resulted in Palestinians having to bear the weight of responsibility, even though they are the victims of a brutal military occupier who is lawless and bigoted, and all things associated with rights and privileges were gifted to the Zionists, so the Israelis, no questions asked by the Americans. So just to perhaps conclude, because I don't know how much longer I have to speak, Walid?
Five minutes more. Yeah,
5 minutes. Okay. So in terms of bringing my intervention to a close, I would like to say that obviously civil society has a tremendous role to play. And I certainly know that I do play my role every day of every week, of every month, of every year. And I will continue to play my role, because giving up is not an option, certainly, but also because civil society's function is to so pressure governments so as to get them to do what they should have done a long time ago. And we all know that politicians excel at postponing the inevitable. The trouble that we have is, in that intervening period, too many people have died because they've been killed. Too many people have been are suffering and are mourning the loss of their loved ones, very often with no closure, because bodies are not returned to the families. So there is no proper burial service, no proper burial ritual taking place, and the families cannot say goodbye to their loved ones for one last time. And by moving the graves of the recently murdered freedom fighters is also another affirmation from Mr. Modi and his war criminals associates, by saying that we can do what we want and you have no power. But I beg to differ. We all have power. And of course, the one thing that we need to do, as I said, as civil society, is continue to lobby. But also the other thing that we have to do is to establish greater, stronger, wider, closer coalitions of networks in order to close the gaps in international solidarity. And that would, in my view, enable us to campaign, lobby, and petition far more effectively. We have tended to, within the solidarity movement, to work in clusters, but certainly not in a manner which is coordinated, coherent, and joined up. And that has been one of our greatest weakness. So we don't have our work cut out, but we need to continue to communicate with each other and work far more closely with one another. And we all know, as Mr. Mandela described it in his long walk to freedom, we all know that in regards to the truth and reconciliation process, people looked to the past in order to understand the present so that they could work together towards a negotiated future. The same happened with the Good Friday Agreement in between the Catholic and Protestant communities in Northern Ireland. And of course, this is another historic wrong that was bequeathed by Britain. So first, Britain messed up Palestine, then it messed up Kashmir, and it messed up Ireland and Northern Ireland. I recently asked a former Conservative member of the European Parliament why she thought history was not important. She said, "We cannot go back to the days of partition. That would help no one." And when I confronted her and I said, "Do you think history does not live in the hearts of people, in the minds of people, in the souls of people? Do you think history is really to be carelessly discarded as easily as that?" I reminded her that history is indeed of paramount importance. And this is
Madam,
where
your time is off now, madam.
thank you.
Thank you. I will request Dr. Mubin Shah. You are knowing him. He is a tall leader of our Kashmir. He is presently in Malaysia, and he had spent his all life for the right to self-determination movement. Dr. Shah Saab, sir, mic is yours. We welcome Javed Rashid Saab, sir. Javed Rashid Saab, are you hearing us, sir? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Saab, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this webinar. And basically, we are here for the sake of, in the sense that human rights basically are every day being violated in Kashmir, every day, and at a very very almost in the case of in every aspect. Now, for example, we have human rights violations for our economy, for our environment, for our person. All these are being done, and in and with impunity, with impunity, because of varied reasons, and particularly because of the fact that the world feels that India is a very big market, and they want to be on the right side of India. And now, with the whole world sort of going against China, they feel that India is the only country which can, be their sort of a frontline state against China. And unfortunately, this is happening. And although, as a well-wisher also of India, for that matter, we would like them to be a part of Asia rather than be part of the new Cold War, which is brewing up now because of the regional situation, and because of the worldly things which the United States of America and the European states are doing. They did it in Middle East. They did it in other areas, and now they are trying to target this part of the world, and unfortunately, Kashmir may become a target. We get involved in it. Our history is replete with this. That in the 1950s, we were on the other side. We were on the American side, the American group, and because Pakistan was close to them, and at that point of time, we got involved in the Cold War, and Russia vetoed all after that any action to be taken in the Security Council. And now, hopefully not, it will be on the other side. If some, suppose for any reason, because we do not yet feel that the United Nations is going to take any action. Up till now, they have not done. They are only speaking about it. The UN Security Council has not met. They have had a sort of a private meeting rather than a public meeting of the 5 members, of the permanent members, and whether it will further go into a full session on Kashmir, we don't know. And at that time, we feel this other bloc, which was with us in the 1950s, will be now against us, just because of of the regional situation between China and India, because the Western world is propping up India. This is the unfortunate part, and this is where I in a recent conference which was held on through virtually in Turkey. I did tell about all that, and and that is why I feel that the civil society in these countries, in Europe, in America, have to come up, have to come up and support the truth, not support something which the government wants to do, or just for the reasons which are not for hegemony, for international, to have power, and the civil society comes up. And this, I feel, can be done only when everybody, well-meaning persons, like Suraya is there. She can, have a very good say, particularly in the Western world, and people like her have be there at the forefront to fight this, because we only Kashmiris feel that people all over the world should fight for justice and the truth, nothing but the truth. And this is where we feel lacking of the civil society in these countries. We recently were encouraged by when there was a very big movement of Black Lives Matter in the United States, and we a lot of non-resident Kashmiris living in the United States, supported that. They supported also because that was the correct thing to do, and at the same time, we expect those same people to support us also, because these are commitments given by the government of by the United Nations, and it is one of the main pending issues in the United Nations, and I, I've written papers on it, in the sense that because this conference is basically also on the regional situation. I have written that that because a lot of people will tell me as a businessman, what do you what is your idea about Kashmir? I would tell them that Kashmir can be the ultimate oasis of peace and development in the region, and it can be done. The model is there. I have written on it, ultimate oasis Kashmir, and how it can be done. And I got the opportunity when I was the president of the joint chamber. That was, both the chambers of both the sides, and we did pass a resolution on free economic zones to declare whole of Jammu and Kashmir as free economic, and that was a model for peaceful resolution of Kashmir. And with win-win situation for everybody. All the three, long back in 2013, if I remember correctly, I wrote this paper, a detailed paper, and there also I wrote about China, although at that time China was not as much involved as it is today. So because all the three countries have got interest in Kashmir. So, and by this latest episode in Ladakh, it is now clear that all the three countries, and if they go through that model, it can be a very peaceful solution for peace. But at the same time, how to arrive now at that stage is only by the fact that, leaving aside the governments, what we as private people or civil society people can fight is that give us the right of self-determination. It is a universal right. It is not that I am asking for Pakistan. I am not asking for independence. I am asking for right of self-determination for everybody in Kashmir. Give the choice to the people of Kashmir. This is what is democracy. What in India is harping all and telling from all over the roofs of all the world that this is a democracy. What democracy? First of all, I told in another webinar just some days back. I said, how can how can the people in the West agree and accept accession document which is supposed to be purportedly, they have never shown the original, has been signed by a Maharaja who bought us the whole valley of Kashmir along with his people from the British for for money. Yeah, and all the British people first of all should be ashamed of it, that and if anybody does not support our self-development, that means he doesn't have a conscience, that he to set right the history. As what Suraya was telling, that somebody told you that you don't need to go to the history. Why not? These are the people who did the biggest injustice to us and sold us to a Maharaja just because he helped the British to defeat the Sikhs, and we are suffering from that date up till now. And it's surprising that this type of the world, in this time of the world, they are accepting a document, even if they have if that guy has signed it. He was not supposed to represent us. He was not supposed to represent us. He was a tyrant. He was a tyrant, and he the other day in 13th of July, we had the program on our people who were shot dead, or 22 of them. And there also I told the same thing. How can they do have the British people or the European people who are talking about conscience, who are talking about human rights, don't have their conscience? How can they accept such a document? Number one. Number two is also this thing, that even if you accept that document, and that document had a condition from the Mountbatten, who was the Governor General at that time, that this will be subject to the will of the people, leaving aside the UN Security Council resolutions. So that document also is against the government of India. People are not asking questions about it, and they are not telling them when when the Indians get up in any international forum and say, "Oh, we are based in Kashmir because of this document." What document? The document which is having based on first of all lies, and based on tyranny. No, 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 and oppression. This is what it is. So it is very. We have a very, very good case for civil society people. We want the people to put pressure on their governments that you do right. Leave aside the government. They have their own interest. They have their geopolitical interest and all that. This is what my belief is. That until and unless, and we need to tell our story correctly and truthfully. If we are doing something wrong, we should point it out. Yes, we are doing wrong. If we are doing right and we are fighting for our these rights, we should get the support of every well-meaning person all over the world, because it is based on facts, on truth, nothing else. Now, we have got more than 100,000 people killed. They have become martyrs for us. More than 100,000 people, and every day there is killing, and they are all, the encounter killings. They are not killed. A person who has been trained just for 4 or 5 days, 900,000 army cannot disarm him. This is how are the people accepting it? How the world is accepting it? That such people cannot be disarmed. So this is my point. My point is, nobody is questioning India. Nobody is questioning his credentials. They will never be, until and unless justice given to the people of Kashmir, there will be no peace in East Asia. There will be no peace in the world, for that matter. And particularly now, that is why it is more urgent that the people in Europe, America come out and for our support. And how to do that? People like you, people like others who are attending this, and who hear this in the international arena, they need to advise Kashmiris how to do it, how not to do it. So instead of going into the discussions of that we have done certain things, we accept certain things if we have done something wrong, no problem. But the basic thing is, this is an agreement. This is the conditions of the UN Security Council. Nothing is being done on these rights. I think I am clear enough about what I wanted to say about this, about the particular issue. Walid Saab.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Thank you, Dr. Saab. You have given some sane suggestions that India should be a part of South Asia. not the part of anything else. So,
Exactly.
Wasim Raza, are you listening me? Wasim Raza, are you listening me? Wasim Raza, are you listening me? आकिब आकिब आप वसीम रजा को बताएं कि नाउ इट इज हिज टाइम.
Wasim Mirza. Wasim Mirza, are you with us?
He is with us, but he's not listening.
I think he has
Hello.
unmuted his mic. Maybe. Yeah,
Yeah,
Wasim Mirza,
Wasim, now
are
we are
you
Hello.
with us?
listening to you. It's your time. It is your time, Wasim.
Wasim, mic is yours. Go ahead. I think he has some internet connection problem. So maybe he is trying to reconnect, sir.
Wasim, go ahead. Mic is yours now in Iran.
Hello.
Yeah, yeah,
Hello. Are you
Wasim, we
listening
are
me?
hearing you. Go ahead. Yeah, we are hearing you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thanks to all of you, and I appreciate for your efforts. As far as the Kashmir is concerned, that Kashmir experienced 3 decades of violence, and the situation of Kashmir is today is no more different before the August 5, 2019. When we talk about the Kashmir, because Kashmir is the name of civilization, Kashmir having the history of 3,000 years. So this time the Kashmir has been changed from a state into an UT. And when we talk about 370, we need to accept and know that the attempt was made in illegal and undemocratic way. Because we are not aware of the history of Kashmir,
Dear friends, I think there is some problem to Wasim. He's not get properly connected.
Yes,
Javed,
sir. I think he has some
Javed
internet connection.
Rashid Saab, Javed Rashid Saab, mic is yours, sir.
Simple. Uh, the Kashmiris will not be helped by UN, not by OIC, not by EU, and therefore we need to seek out manners and ways by which these people can be directly helped and helped now. To me, there are two things, two events, two occurrences, happenings in the recent past which should give some hope to the Kashmiri people. Firstly, it is the Chinese actions on LSA or reactions on line of control, and second is the Arab elite reaction to the mistreatment of Muslims in India. Now, I will take these one by one. The August 5 Indian actions on the Chinese issued some statements. These were misunderstood, misread by all, including India. On August 5, the Chinese position on Kashmir radically changed. Up to that point, they used to incorrectly say that the dispute was between India and Pakistan and should be resolved between India and Pakistan. On August 5, they announced that they are a direct party to the dispute. From that point onwards, uh, uh, the Indians also started building infrastructure, roads, airports, and make statements about CPAC and AJK. They were preparing to invade GB and AJK. The Indian actions now have curtailed this movement. They have uh, managed to uh, bisect or interrupt the road and the ability of the Indian armed forces to take any military action against Pakistan or against CPAC or against GBN against AJK. The Chinese actions from here onwards will not be influenced by people like me or people like you, NGOs or activists. They will, they have an agenda. They will continue working on this agenda. Unfortunately, this has become now a part of the uh, Cold War between the US and China. But anyway, this has some potential of some assistance to the Kashmiri people. But what is very significant to me and what is very important for people like for NGOs and activists is that the actions of the reactions of the Arab elite on the mistreatment of Muslims in India. All across the Middle East, the Indonesians and Malaysians were always pro Kashmir, and the people and the governments were all supportive of the Kashmiri effort. But the Arab governments were not. But the Arab elite went against the stated policy of their rulers and made very, very positive statements. In fact, actions were taken. People were uh, deported, people lost jobs. For me, the best and the most promising way is to force India through the economic route. As soon as the Arab elite made these actions, sorry, as soon as the Arab elite made these actions, the Indians at least formally started to discourage such statements in India, although it did not bring out a fundamental change in Modi's policies. But at least formally, they, at the governmental level, they started to discourage the Indians speaking against Muslims in very, very horrific terms. Now, my point is that India has a large diaspora in Middle East. If the Indian actions in Indian held Kashmir, the killings of youth, these killings are not of militants. At least 50% of those killed were not militants. These should be linked with uh, uh, Indians should be deported or they should lose their jobs. As effort should be made to create a linkage between the Indian actions in Indian occupied Kashmir and between employment and presence of Indians in the Middle East. If you this will need a concentrated and a coordinated effort. Like Soraya said, a lot of people are doing small things, but this is not coordinated. This is not synced. This is not coordinated. They will need to have some sort of a coordination to develop this BDS or KBDS movement. This has the promise. This has the ability to force India to at least be very careful whilst they keep on killing these Kashmiri young people. This is all I have to say at this point in time. If you give me a chance again, I will maybe add to this.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Javed Rashid Saab. You have given really some valuable suggestions. Madam, now question arises. We have this. We have to end. We have just 6 minutes now left from our kitty. What should be a coordinating effort and the linkage, and where shall start? As Javed Rashid Saab said, and Dr. Mubin Shah said, what should be a linkage and how we can coordinate these efforts, and what should be a basic point so that we will move forward. It is not just we have talked and we have given some suggestions and how we can implement them so that they can be result oriented. We have just 5 minutes, madam.
Well, obviously, we need to take this discussion forward after the webinar has come to a close. We we need to sit together and we need to establish a framework. I've already drafted a framework myself, which is to be extended to many other regional and international organizations, whether they are formally constituted or loosely associated. So that work is already in progress. And of course, as our brother David said, BDS is extremely important. So as civil society, the role of civil society is to work on the boycott side of things with a view to continue the process on the political side. You may know that there are many, many churches who have divested from occupied Palestine. So BDS does work in Palestine, and it certainly is going to work in Kashmir. But in the time that I have left, I'm afraid I can't cover everything. All I want to say is that we need to work together and then continue to work on what I have drafted and come to a point where we have a common minimum ground in terms of our mandated aims. So we can do a lot, but we need to do it together.
Same question is to Sir Javed Rashid Saab. Sir, how we will coordinate? What should be our second step?
Firstly, I would say that you should fix targets. One target is what I already gave you, the linkage between the killings in Kashmir and employment. And second is that firm Google are planning to invest large amount of money in India. There should be a concentrated effort to make these large firms desist from any FDI to India. How to do this? I think Sister Suraya has a framework. We should establish a committee or a group which should go over this and establish a procedure of what should be done, and then how to integrate this and how to manage this. This will be very, very important. This should be done in days, not in months, not in weeks. And this will be very, very effective if you are able to coordinate this in a short time.
Sir, Dr. Mubin Shah, sir, same question is to you. There are some concrete suggestions that framework is already drafted by Suraya Boyd, and we should establish a committee throughout the world who are influential people. And what should be our next setup, sir?
You see, I feel, because I was talking to some people today also about this BDS, this thing. And I think, one of the things should be that, we should have some icons in the entertainment field and sports field, particularly from Europe and America, who could become our supporters, and they will be, they will become the flag bearers for our this initiative. This is one thing which I think she will be because they know more about the Hollywood and about the sports icons, because we need to have icons in Hollywood, rather than in Bollywood or in other country. And we could have also icons in, for example, in the Arab world, because Turkey already they are doing something about it, and in the Arab world there should be now icons in both entertainment as well as who will take our message, because that this is going to be the most effective way of doing it.
Sir, I think Madam Surya want to add something.
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to help put your mind at rest. We already have very high profile figures in the entertainment, fashion, and many other sectors. What we need to do is start the process. As I said, I have drafted a framework with the aims and the objectives. We need to go over it, and together, when we agreed the way forward, then we can begin to take it forward.
So, Mr. Walid, Dr. Walid can make a small group on WhatsApp or whatever it is, and small group so that it can be built on.
Yeah, madam, it is good suggestion. Sir Javed Rashid, please share your number, sir, on the internet. Akib Ali, do you want to say anything to conclude this session?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for. I would like to thank my precious guest, Soraya Boyd, Sir Dr. Mubin Shah Saab, Sir Dr. Walid Rasool, for their valuable input on this topic, which is about the dynamics of the South Asia and the current scenario of the Kashmir, and the current situation what are the Kashmir are facing. And the world is now seeing it, what is actually happening to the Kashmir, and it is our responsibility to highlight this brutality and this atrocities of the Modi regimes in the front of the world from this source. And I would really like to thank all of my precious guests for their time and for their valuable input, sir. Thank you so much.
I will like to say, guest listeners, we were expecting 20 people directly from the Indian occupied Kashmir, but due to internet connection, none of them could speak because they were very much connected with me. They are saying that we have 2G connections and we could not avail this opportunity. This is absolutely what we can do, and simply we are really sad that we cannot get connected. It was specially for the scholars, peace activists, and the freedom fighters of our Indian held Kashmir, but none of them get connected with our webinar. It is unfortunate. Still, some are there. So I am now I'm concluding this session. I'm really thankful to Madam Suraya, Dr. Mubin Shah, and Javed Rashid Saab, and Akibidi, and other people who joined us in webinar. It is some 72 people are on this connected here. So thank you, Madam. Thank you, Dr. Shah Saab. Thank you, Javed Rashid Saab. Thank you, Allah Hafiz.
Thank you. Salam alaikum.